Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're having a fabulous Wednesday and not too cold. I don't know if it's because it was so warm last week that I feel like the weather this week, I am like so cold this week. I just can't get warm. So I'm wearing my huge sweater this morning because I'm freezing. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about how to help our students or our children learn how to fail. And usually as parents, that's something that we always think we want to avoid. We don't want our children to ever fail because that's bad. They feel bad, there's repercussions. You just don't want your kids to have to go through that. But there's a lot of benefit to failure in that they learn how to be resilient and how to overcome something. And like what they can learn from failing sometimes outweighs what they would have gotten if they never had failed. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. Last year when we did our book club, we actually read a book about this and it was really good. So we spent a lot of time talking about this last year, but I still wanted to do this topic this year because we obviously have parents that weren't with us last year. And this is something that I think it's a really valuable topic. And it's one of those topics that like if you get this concept, you kind of get everything else that we've been talking about. This is kind of like a really good foundational parenting skill that can lead to help in a lot of areas. It's really broad. Yeah. What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, so it's kind of like it comes full circle because, last year we had talked a lot about like our kids are finishing high school, like our older kids are finishing high school and moving on, and how equipped are they to handle the real world. So it's kind of fun to get to watch like how it's played out in good ways and in bad ways. And, I still catch myself totally enabling my 19-year-old. And so just kind of preparing for this meeting, I was reflecting on the last year of like, okay, there were definitely things that I did right as far as letting him fail. And then there's still things where I kind of pick up the slack for him because he's my baby and I don't want him to struggle. But then, a lot of opportunity comes with struggle. So yeah, it's been an interesting year to watch how capable he is and how a lot of the things that he struggled with last year really brought him to this place of being independent. And that's as a parent, it's a little bit hard to let go in some ways, but it's also like, gosh, it's almost like pat myself on the back. Like he's okay, he's thriving, he's learned a lot. And, it starts when they're young, right? Like we don't want them to get hurt and we protect them, and that's a good thing, right? But like, how many times do we get in the way of them learning a good lesson, even when they're young, right? I mean, even something as simple as like, you told them 5 times to grab their lunch off of the counter and they did it, and they come to school and they're hungry. And we're sad, we don't want them to be hungry, so we bring their lunch to school, and then the same thing happens again next week because they didn't learn their lesson, right? So it's like trying to find that balance between protecting them and being a good parent versus completely enabling them. So why is this such an important topic? Your kids are going to grow up, whether we like it or not. They're going to grow up and they're going to have a lot of opportunity to make mistakes. And I think mistakes has this kind of bad connotation, like we don't want our kids to mess up, but really like, what have we learned when we messed up? I've had a lot of failures in my life. I probably went to every community college in the Bay Area, dropped out several times before I kind of finally got it together. And I feel like that really makes me who I am, because I overcame those challenges and I didn't have it easy, right? And my parents, as much as they could, they tried to get the obstacles out of my way, but I still had to go through those struggles, and I don't regret them because I learned a lot. So I think one of the things that I see as far as like quote unquote failure is I have a lot of students who have done well through school, like straight A's all the way through. And then all of a sudden come junior, senior year, they get a B on something. And it's a full-blown crisis. And one of the things that I think is important is that they fail while they're still at home with us, while we still have to support them, while we're still here to be there with them. Because for some kiddos, they don't have that first failure until they're off and they're in adulthood and they're in a job. And at that point, it's a real huge crisis. So I think giving them the opportunity to fail while they're still with us gives us the opportunity to guide them, to help them, to make it a teachable moment. So I'm just going to kind of go through it, almost like going through the book, like chapter by chapter, but like just a few blurbs about it. And then, we can kind of discuss. So the first idea is that our view on children and their education has changed throughout history. I think when in the past, we were really focused on autonomy and having them be independent. And as, generations have changed, we're more focused on forget everything else. We just need you to get into a good school and go to a good career. And so we tend to be what they call snowplow parents, where we get every obstacle out of the way that doesn't have to do with education so that they can focus on that. But then they have a lot of missed opportunities. Like, how many of you have ever stepped in when your kiddos are having arguments with their friends, right? How many of you have stepped in when they're having issues in the classroom, with their teachers, and haven't had an opportunity to remedy that themselves? Like, how many of us have actually stepped in and done that? I'm guilty all the time. I don't know about you, Jenny, but I have definitely emailed my fair share of teachers. I've gotten upset for my kiddo for certain things that are going on in school. And there's been many times where I haven't given him the opportunity to kind of defend himself or advocate for himself. And I think that's been a real disservice.
Yeah, definitely I have not interfered with conflicts with friends. And I actually remember when my daughter was, it was either the 5th or the 6th grade. I feel like it was 6th grade, where she had one of those friends where they're always fighting, one of those friends. And the girl's mother emailed me about it, and was like interfering. And I was just like, back off, lady. Like, let them figure this out. Like, they're 12. I just remember it bothered me so much, this mom emailing me about this petty fight that they had. It's not a big deal. I have certainly, I think that when your kids are younger, yeah, it's good. You have to advocate for your kid and email the teacher when something's not clear and you're not understanding, or you feel like there's an issue. I think that that's a really good, and having a relationship with your child's teachers is really good. I think when they get, we're dealing with this right now with our son. We're really trying to get him to advocate more for himself and take ownership of his schooling. This past weekend, there was a couple of signs, he's not used yet to having to do homework over the weekend. And I'll be honest, us as parents, we're not used to him having homework over the weekend. It's kind of like, oh, it's the weekend, we have a break. And then it's like, no, but he's, in the second part of 7th grade now, and they're definitely assigning weekend homework. And so there were some things this past weekend that he didn't complete, and he knew he had to do them. And so when we talked to him about it, he was like, but you didn't make me do it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was had this thought in my head, are we always going to have to make him do homework? When is he going to take ownership? And that's something definitely that we as parents have not been doing a good job with our son, and having him be self-motivated to do this. And it's really hard. Yeah. I feel like I was going to say something else.
Yeah, when it comes to motivation for him, no, because a lot of kids are motivated by punishment from their parents, right? So it's.
I remember.
Go ahead.
I remember what I was going to say. What I'm going to say, and this is me putting on my principal hat, that certainly by the time kids get to high school, I think it's not, I just think, I know it is very, very important for the kids to be the ones talking to their teachers. That doesn't mean that you as the parent can't be behind the scenes and standing over their shoulder as they write that email and be like, say this, but having it come from them where they have ownership of it is really, really important.
And I think when they see it work out, they're like, oh, I did that. Not mom did it, but I did that. It talks a lot about intrinsic motivation. Are children motivated by within or motivated by external factors like rewards or punishments and things like that. And it says, from the very first day of school, children are pushed to deliver good grades. They are taught that without them, they won't live the life that they want or become a respected member of society. This forces all students to go the same route and strive for consistent A's. Failure has been removed as an option. In humans, we know that when children are enthusiastic about the task, they persevere even when it gets tough. Have you seen your kiddo play a video game? And they practice and practice and practice, and they fail and they fail and they fail, and they finally pass the level or kill the bad guy or whatever. It's like we've removed that for them in school, because if our kid brings home a B or a C or a D or something less than we think they should be bringing home, we're upset. I'm worried. I'm like already going to like, oh my gosh, is he going to graduate from high school? Is he going to, be able to be a productive member of society? And it's like, I don't give him that same opportunity. And it's interesting to watch, like when it is a task that they prefer, of course they can persevere. So it's like, how do we get our kiddos to do the things that are hard, that maybe are not their choice, right? Like, how do we give them intrinsic motivation? We don't really give it to them, but we provide them with opportunities to do that. I'm all for rewards in that. And I think that's, even now I tell my son like, hey, can you do me a favor and grab stuff out of the car? And he's like, how much are you going to pay me? I'm like, what? Like my mom would have like never paid me to do the things that I've paid my children to do. And I think for me, sometimes it's just easier, right? I'm picking my battles, but what am I teaching them? I'm teaching them that anytime you do something good for someone else, you're requiring some sort of payment or reward for it, instead of like having him be motivated by the fact that it's helpful, that he's contributing to the family. Like I've totally not given them those opportunities to do that. So, you think about like how many kiddos are really learning and enjoying the content of classes versus how many are doing everything they need to do to get that A. It's like we risk not really delving into the subject matter and really like enjoying it because the hyper focus is on the grades. I'm sure you see this all the time as well. Like I see it all the time. Like, why are you taking these AP classes? Do you like them? Are you enjoying them? No, I just need to get an A and I just need to do this, this, and this. So there's so much need for them, but not a lot of like desire or want or passion even. I've seen that kind of be taken out of it. So I think, if your kiddo comes home with a grade that maybe is less than you thought it is, like I would wonder, are you learning? Are you interested in the subject matter? Like how many questions do we ask about the actual class versus how many questions are we asking about the actual grade? Mm-hmm. What are we showing them is the most important thing to us, right? I can't remember the last time I'm like, so what did you write about in English and how was it? And I'm like, are you turning in your assignments? Why do you have a C? Like, why does it say you have 10 missing assignments and you're not, paying attention? And I think it's hard because we see that as like a failure. And so how do we shift that mindset of like, we have to give them the opportunity to fail so that they grow?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I mean, just the way we're talking about this conversation, we're talking about B's and C's as failures. And are B's and C's failures? No, they're not failing the class. Like a failure is getting an F. Like that's not what we're talking about. And I think that it's just like this level of what I see in a lot of our students, which I think is something that we need to teach our kids not to be, but this like level of perfectionism, where they see the A as perfect and that's what they have to get. And that's not something that's attainable throughout life. If you think about your life as an adult, sometimes you're just getting by. And you're not always going to get an A in life. You're not always going to be able to be doing it perfectly. Just this morning, because I work out every morning and I don't know if I was just tired. I am very tired today, but it was so much harder today. Like I would give my performance this morning in my workout like a D, maybe a C, if I'm like being generous. It was so hard, but it's okay. I did it. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Yeah. Like I beat myself up about that. And I think that that's something that we really need to teach our teenagers, that sometimes like you got to see in the class, but you got through it. Yeah. You actually got through it. It's not perfect, but it's okay. It's okay. You got through it. It's like move on. And I think that is a really important thing to teach our kids, that, they're not, they may take a hit on their GPA.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme thing of life, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I would love to hear from parents of like, can you think of a time or a situation where you took away your kiddo's ability to fail? Meaning you got in the way or you intervened somehow of something where they were headed towards failure. I'll give you a simple example. My kid had a baseball game and I knew he didn't wash his clothes and I had told him over and over, and he went to bed and I decided that I was going to wash his baseball pants for him and have them ready next to him, his backpack for the following day. Sounds simple, but really like now I'm doing that on a continuous basis and he expects that that's going to happen. What would have been good is for me to let him go to his game with filthy pants. I think for me, I was so worried about how that reflected on my mothering skills that I took that opportunity away from him. So it can be something as simple as forgetting their lunch or not doing their laundry, forgetting their project at home, So if anybody has any situations where they've done that, where they could have allowed their kid to fail, but did it. And this is not like a judgmental space. We've all done it. We're all guilty of it. We all do the best we can. There's no parenting manual. Yeah, I'd love to hear. I would love to know that I'm not the only one.
Parents, if you don't want to, you can just put it in the chat if you want. You don't have to actually speak.
Yeah.
I mean, I know definitely I'm guilty of that. I mean, yeah, like I just did it recently with my daughter who had this like enormous research essay she had to write for her English, and she's in college and she was freaking out about it. And I was like, oh, I'll help you do the research. Like, just give me the topic. I'll get you some sources. I'll help you. She's in college.
Are we going to be doing that when they go to work? We're like, I
know like, right? Especially since she wants to be a teacher. Like, I can see myself like, I'll write your lesson plans.
I can totally see it. I can totally see it. There's a thing here. It says hard lessons can be longer lasting. Yeah. I'm trying to think of some situations where I learned a really hard lesson by failing. Ooh, I'm sure there's plenty of them. But I just, again, about how we take those lessons away because we're afraid. It's hard to see your kid sad. It's hard to see your kid disappointed,
Well, and sometimes failure, it's for the best because maybe a door closes because you fail. Because sometimes it can, like we're talking about, like you didn't turn in an assignment or you like went to baseball with dirty pants, and that's like minor type stuff. One thing, and I've shared this before, but I haven't shared it recently. Piedmont Hills is not the first principal job I applied to. Before I applied for the job at Piedmont Hills, I actually applied to be the principal at Evergreen Valley High School, and I did not get it. And I was devastated. It was awful. I took it very badly. I was really upset about it. And now sitting here, I am so happy that I'm not the principal of Evergreen Valley High School, and that because that door closed, but another door opened. And like, it actually, like, this is a much better place for me to be. I'm so happy that happened to me. And so that, I think, was one thing that we have to, like, when you don't get the job or you don't, college acceptance, you don't get into the college that, your kid didn't get into the college. That's a big thing that our kids deal with. They didn't get into that college that they really wanted to, and teaching them that's going to be okay. That, like, there's a reason that happened, and this is going to, like, life works out.
Yeah. This month is the season of college rejections. And that's been tough, Let's see, there's a comment here.
I let my kid walk to school when he didn't wake up on time, but I drove him instead.
That's a great example. Yep. Like, oh, I don't want you to be late. I don't want to,
that's a great one. I get emails from parents, like, oh, my kid can't walk to school. And I'm like, how far is it? Because I bet they probably can. But I know I'm going to be guilty of that too. When my son goes to high school, the high school is 3/4 of a mile away from us. And I know with our schedules, sorry, it's going to be difficult for us. Like, why would we drive him? I didn't drive my daughter to school when she went to the same high school. She walked, but she's much more responsible than my son. My son, like, I can totally see him being like, oh, I just want to go to school today. And like, I know that, he's in the 7th grade. So I know a couple of years from now, like, that's something I'm going to wrestle with. And like, you guys keep me honest, because that's something that, like, he's going to, like, if he doesn't go to school and he's late, like, that's going to be a repercussion that he's gonna have to face the consequences of that.
And some of these things, the stakes are higher, right? Like when it comes to like walking to school, and maybe if you're worried about safety, I mean, obviously that's different than like making him wear dirty clothes or whatever. But if it's like, I kind of do what you do with your youngest, with my youngest, of like, I just assume that he's not going to do something. Like, I don't even give him the opportunity to blow it. Like, he might very well get to school on time and, do his own thing, but I'm like so worried that he's not. Like, I almost like shortchange him. I'm like, I don't think he could do it. I don't think he's capable. And my husband's like, how do you know? Like, until you try, how do you know? And I'm like, I just know him. And it's like,
Yeah.
if he heard me talking like that, he would be so hurt, Like,
and I would love to hear from other parents if you do that with your youngest child, because I just feel like because you still baby them, they're the youngest, and I just feel like, oh no, he's not ready.
Yeah.
He's not ready. And I like think back to what my expectations of my daughter at the exact same age, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I should give him more credit.
Yeah. They surprise you. I mean, honestly, they surprise you sometimes. My youngest one he gets out of bed in the morning, and he was the one where I'm like, I'm always going to be dragging him out of bed, and there was a couple of times where I did have to leave him because I was going to be late to work, and that was difficult. And, I let him fail that day. The problem with him is that he thought that was like a gift to not have to go to school that day.
That was my life this morning. Normally my husband takes care and gets him to the bus in the morning, but my husband has to be at work early this week. And so I had to do it, and he was not moving and was not ready to go. And I had to go, and I left him at home. I called him in sick. He's not at school today. And I know he thinks it's a reward. I know he thinks he like won something and I'm like, oh gosh.
So if parenting let's pretend parenting's a test. It's not really a test. Will we pass the test? Would our children be okay if they moved out in a few months? What would worry us the most? Gosh. Like, if you have like this sinking feeling like I do of like, would my kid be okay? Obviously, if they're a little bit older, would my kid be okay with the skills that they have to be out on their own right now? And if not, what worries me the most?
Yeah. I
love lunch. Eat too much junk food.
Sure, the diet would be terrible. Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be like hot Cheetos and Fanta soda. I don't know. I agree.
It would. Oh God.
Yeah. And then thinking back with that comment right there, like they eat too much junk food, like, do we micromanage their diet? How do we feed them? How do we encourage them to eat well? Do we give them options? Do we teach them? Or do we just like feed them what we feed them and then hope that when they get older that they'll be able to do that on their own? That's kind of what I've done. I'm just like, here, just eat what I give you. It's good for you. And never really give them the opportunity to make choices. I think we take a lot of choices away. And then, like Lon said, like, what would my kid eat if they were on their own a month from now?
So I this past week had it, my daughter is moving out in a couple of months. So like I'm very living this like really like, is she prepared to do this? Because she is moving out and going to be on her own. And one thing, like I've talked about, I've shared her struggles with depression. And so she takes antidepressants and like, it's really, and that's something where I've been like getting them like refilled and making sure she's taking, and I'm trying to transfer that to her and that responsibility because she's going to be on her own. And I'm like, you have to take care of this. But I still am very aware of like where she is and is she taking her medication and how many pills does she have left. And so last week she had taken the last pill and hadn't gotten a refill. And I was like, Hannah, what are you doing? And she was like, well, I don't know. It's just so hard. You gotta, and all these excuses. And I lost it. And I'm like yelling at her. But at the same time, I'm like remembering all of these parent talks that we've had, and dealing with our kids with depression and anxiety. And so I'm trying to like be very cautious in my yelling and like not like, be supportive. But at the same time, like I was just like, I need you to take ownership of your mental health. I need you to do this. And so my husband and we were like, you're calling the pharmacy right now. And because she had thrown, because we have a pill divider, for the days of the week. So that way she remembers if she's taken them or not. She had thrown the original bottle away, so she didn't have the prescription number. And she's like, well, I don't have the prescription number, because when you call Walgreens, it was like, put in the prescription number. And so she hung up. She's like, I don't have that. And I'm like, call back and talk to a person. And so I had to sit there and like walk her through this, but I made her do it. And she was like, okay, and so then the next day I was like, I text her, I'm like, listen, I'm sorry I yelled at you yesterday. And she's like, no, it's okay. You were right.
It's stressful. It's stressful. Like my older son, he's already out of the house, and like, there's been so many things that have popped up in the last year of like, I didn't teach you that. Like, if you get an offender bender, like, what do you do? We didn't really have that conversation. If you, get in trouble with the law, like, what do you, all these different things, like, I didn't teach him because I did them for him, and he's figuring it out. But I think his transition into being on his own would have been a lot smoother had I given him more opportunities. It says we all want our kids to grow up brave, strong, and resilient, but what have our behaviors done instead? We've caused anxiety, dependence, and lack of opportunity to problem solve. And I mentioned this a couple parent coffees back about, I was just freaking out over my son. He wanted to drive to Reading to drive his girlfriend somewhere, and he'd only been driving like fully for like a week, and I was really upset about it. And he literally called me out, and he's like, Mom, you cannot project your anxiety on me forever. I get that you're worried about me driving. I get that you're a nervous driver in general, but you have to like, let me do that. And it like, he's like, you talk this talk, like, every kid should be independent, but when it comes down to it, you have to let me breathe. You have to let me do something. And I was just like stunned of like, okay, one, you're a total social worker kid, but two, it's like, I have sheltered them to the point where I have projected my anxiety onto them. And I think I've created fear in a lot of situations. My kids aren't kids who like explore the neighborhood like I did when I was younger. They don't walk places on their own. They never take the bus to Great America. I've given them rides everywhere. And then as they're going into adulthood, I'm still worried about what if they can't take the bus, or what if they can't do that? And it's like, that's on me. That's not on me for not providing those opportunities. And creating anxiety in them. I know that I've fed them that like worry, and how do we just step back, kind of relax into it and just let things unfold? Obviously, there's going to be situations where we have to be more present, if it's like safety or mental health stuff, but like, how do we just like step back? Again, that idea of snowplow. How many obstacles have I removed like a snowplow so that my sons have a clear path? One of my sons, I said something to the effect of like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do in life? And at some point you're going to have to pay bills. And he's like, well, at some point you and dad are going to die and we can just have your money. Right. And I'm like, I created this. Like, how did I create this? So, and I think another factor is, let's be honest, they are a reflection of us. Whatever our kids are doing, we have this kind of almost like pride in how our kids turn out, right? Like if my kid does nothing or drops out of, like, I feel like a failure. So a lot of times I feel like I've snowplowed or gotten obstacles out of his way or did things for him because I didn't want to look bad myself, right? Was I thinking more about how I looked or how he functioned and learned? I don't know. I think I'm guilty of both. I'm going to talk a little bit about praise and how we praise and encourage our kids. A lot of parents praise their children every possible way they can, but can praise actually demotivate your kid? It's all about how we praise them. First of all, we should praise their behavior. We should praise a child's behavior, not the child. Basically, if you praise your kiddo every time they get an A, they're going to do everything in their power to get that A, right? It's going to be stressful. They're going to, but are we praising their ability to problem solve, to try new things? Like if I knew I could get a solid A without trying something new, why would I try something new? Right? Why would I take any risks in my education if I could just get an A? Because I don't, maybe I'm like, I have to get my A's. But if my parents praise me in a way of like, I'm so proud of you for putting a lot of effort into what you did, feels a lot different than I'm so proud of that A, right? It says, to praise in the best way, we have to focus on effort. They give up fast if they are just valued for what they put out, right? We want them to actually try, to fail, to try new strategies, all these things. But if we're only looking for that grade, then how do they have the opportunity to do that? I know I'm guilty of looking at report cards. How many of us check School Loop like the stock market? How many times a week do we go on there and check what their grades are versus how many times do we pause each week and ask them what they're learning, what they're excited about learning, what's been going well, what's been frustrating, what challenges they've had. Those aren't conversations that I've had with my own kids. And then I think it's difficult too when you have like our younger ones who just don't really seem to care much about school right now. Like, how do we meet them where they are? How do we talk to them in a way that is meaningful to them right now? Every time I talk to my kid about how school is, it's the same conversation. How's school? Fine. You doing okay? Yeah. I have no idea if that's true or not. So even for me, I'm always challenging myself to ask different questions, to ask specific open-ended questions. Like, what did you talk about in your English class today? What did you learn? Was there anything that you found really difficult with history today? I noticed that you get frustrated when you go to that class, like just having those open dialogues.
I really love about like that you can ask your kids about, and rather than like how was school today, is asking them like, oh, what was something that was really funny today?
Yeah.
And it's like, did anything happen that made you like laugh today? And that's a really great, it could be like something their friend said, or could be like something that, funny that had happened in one of their classes, but it's a great snapshot. And it's like a better question than how was school today, which I'm totally guilty of too. I ask that every day. How was school today?
It's almost like part of my checklist, like ask your kid how school was, check. And it's like,
I mean, my daughter now, I ask her, how was work today? And,
yeah, absolutely.
There's a question in the chat about updating grades. There's not an issue. The grades should be updated because the end of the grading period was just last week and grades were due this week. So it should be updated.
So
if you want to,
whatever's on Infinite Campus right now is the updated grade, the most recent.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, because they had to turn in grades this week, so it should be updated.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about, this sounds so silly, but I want to talk a little bit about chores. How many of our kids do chores and what do they look like? What's going on in your house, Ginny?
My house is a mess. There's no chores going on.
Okay. And parents also type in, like, what are your kids, what's the expectation in your house? What does that look like? What do chores look like? I think chores are always seen as a punishment instead of like something that creates purpose for our kids. When we feel like we're actually a part of a community, we're more inclined to like treat our environment better, right? I've mentioned this before, but like I found lists of chores for children, and the ones that are labeled for preschool kids are pretty much the ones that my kids are still doing. Take out the garbage, put your clothes in the hamper, clean the cat box. Like I haven't grown in the last like 10 years with that, and it just kind of is what it is. So I'm curious, is that an expectation in your house? Is it, maybe I've heard some parents say things like, I don't want to have my kid do too many things around the house because I want them to focus on school. So can anybody give some ideas of what happens? Trina says, feed the dog, pick up after the dog in the backyard, feed cats, clean litter box, do all laundry, take trash out. That's a good list. That's a really good list. Trina, I'd be curious to know, is that something that you have to ask repeatedly for, or is it something that your kiddos have just learned how to do? You know, with all those things, do you ever feel yourself gentle reminders? I like that. Vacuum the floor. Kaylon says, vacuum the floor, throw the trash, clean their own rooms and bathrooms are chores my kids have to do. And how about you, Alon? Do you feel like you have to micromanage that? Do you have to give gentle reminders? Do they just do it on their own? What does that look like in your house? And then do your kiddos complain about it? I know when I give my kids reminders or I remind them that they're like, I know, or they get like a bad attitude. So Lon also says I have to remind them periodically. Now, do you guys pay your kids to do chores, or is it just an expectation? Bruce says, be calm. Yeah. You know, my kids say, Mom, why do you always have to act like that? Like you're just screaming and yelling. And I'm like, I feel like I've been calm for the last 2 hours and now I'm finally at my breaking point. You know, I feel like my kids finally do what I tell them to do when I act like wild and like I'm just like upset and I've had it. So that's good advice, just be calm. I feel like reminders, it makes me wonder, like that question previously of like, what would I be worried for when my kids move out on their own? I would be worried for like mice and cockroaches at this point. That's kind of where we are. That would be my big worry. Nobody likes to be nagged. It's true.
It is true. I was just thinking about like I have this big report that I need to finish today, and I need to, because we have school site council this afternoon. Like I need, like as soon as I'm done here, like I need to go finish this. Like it's been hanging over my head, and I have procrastinated and put it off. And like today's the day, I got to finish it. And if I had somebody like, have you done that yet? Have you done that yet? I would have gone out of my mind because I'm still doing it. Like I know I have to do it, but if I had somebody like actually like, oh, you have to do that. Have you done it yet? Have you done it? When are you going to do that? I would snap too. I'd be like, leave me alone.
It kind of backfires, right? Like the more we micromanage, because I mean, I've even heard kids say like, you know, I was going to do, I don't know if this is even true when you hear kids say like, I was going to do it, but then you kept nagging and nagging and forget it. I don't want to do it. Okay, Lon says some chores are paid jobs, but some are their responsibilities. Yeah. Yeah. How do we feel about paying for chores? It's something that I've done. It's definitely something that motivates them. But one of the things I always tell my kids is like, when our house, like notice the house when we finally get it together and it's clean. Like notice how we feel when we come home versus how we feel when we come home and there's dishes in the sink and it's just chaos. Like I literally feel like this sense of calm, this sense of peace. And I want them to notice that. Like there's been a couple of times where I've sat with my kids and helped them clean their rooms. And then we kind of just sat in there and reflected on like, this feels really good. Don't you feel less stressed like about, you know, mom's not going to come in and nag you. You have a clean space. Everything's clear. Like, doesn't that feel good for you? I found it interesting that my son, he was kind of last on the housing list at San Jose State. And so he ended up living with 8 guys. And there's 8 of them total. And my kid was the one who always left dishes in the sink at home. And it's funny to see how he's become the roommate that washes the dishes. He's the roommate nagging the other roommates to like do their part. And I find that really interesting. And he said, you know, like it feels good when my house is clean. And I don't know, he says, now I get a little bit, Mom, why you were always mad all the time when you came home after work and the house was a mess. He's like, because sometimes I go to school all day and I come back and they've just destroyed the place. So some of these lessons are just going to play out, right? And like some of them are not. And I think this is just like a really important opportunity for them to take ownership, you know, to let them experience that for themselves. You'll see, guys, when they're in college and they're moving out, like, you know, like Ginny's and mine are, you start to realize like, okay, I did okay. Like they're going to come around, they're going to figure it out. It may not be perfect. They may not be totally ready right now, but as you see them grow, you're going to be really proud about the things that they take with them. And then remembering like some kids are easier, right? My first 2 kids are just kind of easy. And the second one or the third one is not. Let's see. So, you know, this is just like, again, like one of those topics where I feel like there's so much room for growth. Go for walks with your kids after supper. Bruce, is that something that you do every day? That's awesome. Just time to like pause, time to reflect, time to talk. And remembering that our behaviors, the way we model them is how our kids learn, right? If you come home and you're stressed out all the time and you're nagging everyone, that's how your kiddo maybe in the future will respond to stress. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at themselves and was like, oh my God, when did I turn into my mother? Right? My mom was always mad when she came home from work because the house was a mess. And I think back about that and I'm like, gosh, I totally understand that, but I also see how difficult it was for her. So do I want to pick my battles? Do I want that to be how I am with my kids? Or do I want to go for a nice walk with my kids after dinner? The house will still be a mess tomorrow. Like it's about picking our battles and then modeling how we handle stress and how we handle failures. Have we ever shared our failures with our kids? Have you failed? I'm sure, Ginny, your kiddos know about the job at Evergreen.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely shared that with them. Yeah, I mean, I don't like always like every little everyday things. I mean, sometimes I do, probably more with my daughter. I do. I think that's because it's my daughter. And plus she's older. Like she and I will talk a lot about stuff. So I probably do share a lot with her. I don't as much with my son.
Yeah. I think I find my kids find it helpful when I do tell them like, hey, this is difficult. Life is difficult. And this is how I handle it. You know, when they see me like go for my walk or go get a massage or whatever I do to decompress, it's like they know that it's normal and it's okay to be overwhelmed and to fail at times. I've had plenty of failures in my life. And I think that's important to model that. If I showed them or made them believe that everything was perfect and I never had a bump in the road, I don't think that would be a service to them. I think it would totally be a disservice. And they know that like, you know, mom's not perfect. Kind of what I want to close on is, you know, just having compassion for ourselves as parents. I think we're really hard on ourselves. We're really hard on our kids sometimes, but I think we're really hard on ourselves. I carry a lot of mom guilt, right? Like I come home from work late. I'm taking a night class right now. The kids ate El Pollo Loco for dinner, and I've kind of really beat myself up. And one of the things it reminds me of is like a lot of times we find our self-worth as parents. How am I parenting? How well are my kids functioning? Do they have everything they need? Am I teaching it? Am I snow plowing too much? And I just have to have compassion for myself because remember, we are all kind of, nobody told us how to do this. We're all doing the best that we can. And so one of the things I want to reflect on is like, what makes you feel like a good parent? What is it that you're doing that makes you feel like a good parent? Or what is it that you haven't been doing that you think would make you feel like a good parent? And I feel like this topic for me is something that I'm really trying to do better. Because I think for me, now that I see one of my kids growing up, like I think for me to be a good parent means that I have my kiddos as prepared as possible for their future. Right. So for me, that's how I'm kind of finding my, not necessarily my self-worth, but kind of like how well I have done this and reminding myself every day that like I have to let them experience life. You know, I have to let them do this. And so, you know, I would just encourage everyone to find the ways that you're maybe enabling your kids and, you know, figure out how this can be a teachable moment for them. Right. Yeah. Let them fail. Let them.
One thing I've been thinking a lot lately with my kids, because my parents have been getting older and like their health has not been good the past couple months, especially with my mom. And I'm finding myself in the position where it's totally new, like where I'm having to really like be the parent for my parents and like take care of them. And so I've been thinking about my own kids and like, am I raising them that, you know, 30, 40 years from now, they're going to be able to do this for me?
That's a whole nother thought.
I know, like, are they going to be able to like do this? Like what I'm doing right now, are they going to be able to do this for me?
You just totally freaked me out.
That's my truth right now. Like that is something like I like really like I thought about that this morning. Like you know, like thinking about my mom and like you know, am I going to have these health problems? You know, would my kids be able to do that?
Wow. I know. I asked my kids for a cup of water right now and it's a thing. So that totally worried me to say that. But no, I think you're absolutely right. Well, that's what I have for today. So I don't know if you have time for questions or whatever's going on with families right now. I know it's a busy time. It's a busy time at school right now. I don't know if you're feeling that at home, but it's definitely been kind of a stressful couple of weeks for our students. We've had like this influx of appointments and I just feel the energy. It just feels very stressed and like crunch time for the kids. So I'm not sure if you guys have experienced that, but just remember, be calm, like Bruce said. Go for your walks. Tonight might be the good night to do that because our kiddos are definitely, whether they're telling you or not, they're definitely feeling the pressure right now.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us. So we won't meet next week because it's spring break. So I hope that you guys as parents get to have some time off for spring break. Too. I know sometimes you're working, but sometimes I think it's, at least for me, like when my kids aren't in school, I feel like that is a little bit of break because you don't have to be on them about their homework. You don't have to be kind of like, are you going to bed on time? Are you doing, like, you do a little rest. So I hope that everybody gets a little bit of rest next week. I personally am looking forward to not having my alarm wake me up. So when we come back, because we missed last week, I got to reshuffle our topics a little bit. But I think the counselors are supposed to be coming the week that we come back. So that'll be the 27th. And I think the counselors are coming to talk about college stuff, which would be for, if you're a senior parent, then you're already past that. This would be for other parents. But I will confirm that. And then of course it'll be in my newsletter. But thank you everybody for joining us today and talking. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay warm. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.